Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. So welcome to the virtual Pasadena Senior Center and our Cultural Thursdays program, which is a grab bag of arts and culture topics. I'm Annie Lasky, the Director of Events. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to especially welcome those of you who are joining us for the first time. We hope to see you many times more. The Pasadena Senior Center is a donor-supported nonprofit organization that offers arts and culture programming, physical fitness, and social services to older adults. I encourage you to check out the many online classes and programs that we have scheduled, as well as information and resources for seniors in the Pasadena area. I just want to mention a couple of upcoming events. Our next Cultural Thursday, so next week, March 4th, we'll be visiting with local Pasadena artist Kenny. He's a plein air artist, his stuff's wonderful, and he is completely delightful. So I hope you'll join us next Thursday for that. On March 11th, we'll be in conversation with actress and comedian Melanie Chartoff, who has just written a memoir called Odd Woman Out, and she'll be visiting with us. The interviewer then will be the book club chair, Elizabeth, will be joining us for that as well. And then the day after St. Patrick's Day on the 18th of March, we will be celebrating things Irish, music, literature, Guinness, Irish things. Also wanted to mention that on March 16th, we start a new 7-session master's series. This one is called Making Connections, the Intersection of Art, Culture, and Design. It's art history with Eleanor Schrader. If any of you attended our Valentine's Day history presentation, that's Eleanor. She'll be with us for that ticketed program that starts on March 16th. And all of this, you can find out more on our website at pasadenaseniorcenter.org. Now, a little bit of housekeeping for today. We have muted the microphones, which will stay muted during the interview, after which we will then unmute. You'll be able to unmute yourself to make comments, and we'll have a Q&A period. Also, you are welcome to put anything in the chat box. You just type in and press the return button, and then that sends your chat out to everyone. So please do feel free to use that. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce today's guest. I have said before, but I'll say again, one of the real perks of my job here at the Senior Center is that this kind of programming allows me to just meet and get to know so many marvelous people. And I have to say that June is one of my new favorite people and my new best friend, and she's just completely awesome. So I'm now going to co-spotlight you, or did I probably didn't even spotlight myself, did I? There we go. So I am, I'm going to add my own spotlight. There we go. So I just want to welcome June today here with us and introduce that June Carryl grew up in Denver and studied political science and English literature at Brown University. She's an award-winning playwright, a successful theater director, and as an actor has worked on stage as well as in television and film. She can currently be seen in Hulu's Hellstrom and Mindhunter on Netflix. So please welcome June Carryl. Yay. It's such a joy to have you here with us. So basically, welcome. And I should also mention that this program is in celebration as well of Black History Month. And I wanted to do a shout out to Betty Roberson, who's in our audience today. She's one of the Ebony ladies who put on a Black History Month celebration for us for many years live. Since we have not been able to do a big party and lunch and jazz concert, we're doing something a little different today, which is just to talk to someone about her career in theater, movies, and TV. And basically, we'll start off with June Carryl. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, okay, sure. So first off, it's really fun to get to talk to you, Annie, I have to say. This is really fun. So I grew up in Denver, as Annie said. I was supposed to be a lawyer. My mom's best friend, Lejeune, and my high school history teacher, and I plotted my career trajectory. It was going to be Brown University for undergrad, University of Chicago for law school, and then I was going to ultimately become a Supreme Court judge. Cut to my fourth year at Brown in political science. And while I am thoroughly enjoying the theory of political science, I am horrible with the numbers. The facts just I can spin a theory like nobody's business, but ask me to outline like look, can't do it. So I slept through my last round of LSATs and then the law entrance exam, and decided to transition to the creative writing slash English lit department. I took a play survey course, my first full year, and wrote a play for my midterm. My the play teacher, her name is Paula Vogel. She invited me because of the play that I wrote for my midterm to join her playwriting class, and I said sure. And um, that was kind of the beginning. I got drafted into a play that we were writing for our midterms that year, a soap opera, because everyone else was again in midterms, and got bit by the acting bug. Um, and a year later, Paula told me, listen, school is always going to be there, because I had thought, okay, I'll stay in grad school, I'll get my PhD, I'll become a professor. But Paula said, school's going to be here. You need to go act. So she sent me to American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. They have a 10-week acting program, summer acting program. And I did that and never looked back. I stayed in San Francisco 7 years, writing and acting, and then brief stint in New York on the East Coast, New York and Massachusetts, and then ran screaming because New York scares me, to to Los Angeles, and I've been here since. And yeah, that's the story, kind of circuitous.
Okay, that's a great beginning bit. And so for anyone who's what we call slash slash, you're a writer slash director slash actor. Sometimes people have like a primary thing they love more than the other or not. I mean, I just put playwright first because that's how I was introduced to you. But, tell us a little bit about sort of your slash slashes and how they make up sort of who you are and what you love to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think the slash slash for me is appropriate because once I decided this is the world that I want to live in, I realized I don't want to have to choose. Sometimes I'm an actor, and sometimes I'm a writer. My experience as an actor has fed both my language as a playwright and my modest understanding, I will say, of how scenes work, how wants work. And those two things in turn are reflected in my work as a director, and I know how to um, talk to actors. It's very interesting. Sometimes it doesn't quite translate. Um, Oftentimes you'll run into directors who love the idea of moving things around on a stage, and they love the idea of big paintings and furniture, and they don't quite know what to do with the people.
They want to sing the set, as we
Sing
call
the
it.
set. Yes, exactly. They want to sing the set. And, human beings don't work like that. So the three are interconnected. There's just no way to unweave them, so I just don't.
And I agree. For those of you out there who know me but don't know that my background is actually in theater, I went to undergraduate school in directing and graduate school in directing, and I ran a theater company back in the 90s. So I really sort of appreciate June's take on, a little bit of everything. That if, as a writer, you know what you want the words to be. As a director and a writer, you're probably looking at the sense of the words and, shall we say, paying attention to the text a little more than some other directors would, because
Yes.
you're super aware of the words. Same thing as an actor.
Yes, exactly. You do tend to, the challenge with being a writer is, what you just said it. It's, what's in your head, but the actor has to be able to say it so it works. Things have to be actable. And I think it's just a little bit of an advantage, I think. I've gotten used to saying stuff, so I'm used to translating that into actionable language.
Yeah, so it's all a big circle.
Big circle.
The writing helps the directing, helps the acting, helps the writing.
Yeah.
Circle
Yeah,
of
exactly.
life. So the other trinity or circle of life would be stage, screen,
Yes.
television.
Yes.
So how did those work in your life?
Stage will always be my first love. Shakespeare, there's no better teacher for an actor. But there are things that you can do on TV and in film that, just in terms of scope that sometimes you can't do on a stage. You can't get this close on stage. And you can jaunt to 100 different locations on a stage, but it's a lot more challenging. And so they're just different sides of the same animal.
Well, let me also mention, and we'll talk a little more in depth about a few of your actual plays and pieces that you've written.
Sure.
The ones that I've seen have been very poetic.
Yes.
Almost stylized. And that translates a little better to stage.
Yes.
Not that
exactly. Exactly. You don't have as much runway in film and television. You got to get to it. And there's not as much room for poetry. There is something about having to rely on the words and only the words on a stage that sort of sets you free in a way that just doesn't quite work, because television and film teach you a short attention span.
Mm-hmm.
And they teach you shorthand. Yeah. And so it's the other reason that I love the stage more than the others, even though I enjoy all three. The idea that you can say something in as poetic a way, a fashion as you will, there's just something about that just moves me. Yeah. Yeah.
So as I say, we'll get to the actual sort of zeroing in or digging down on some of the actual pieces, but how does your point as a woman, and especially as a Black woman working in the industry, how does that affect you? How is your writing affected?
Yeah.
Big question.
Big question. I am what I am. I am a woman. I am Black. Those things intersect in a way in the real world in a very specific way. His story will, we don't need a history lesson on it. I think that everyone's body, everyone's story informs their view of the world and the language with which they express themselves in that world. And so mine is a very particular lens that doesn't. And what's interesting is, realizing a couple decades ago that there was a very particular way in which I had to interact with language because it wasn't necessarily meant for me. Um, you know, the Western canon thinks in terms of a very specific kind of experience. It's masculine, it's Eastern, it's Western European, it's heteronormative. And, when you show up and, hey, I'm a Black girl, it is, uh, it's almost a war opening your mouth. And I think anyone would say that, whatever your point of view, it bleeds into your work. It can't help but. And that's, I think, what's so fascinating about, where we are as a culture today is people are saying, well, what is privilege? What does it mean to own language? What does it mean to, it means, how do you relate to language? Because it's very, very particular, very specific, and is breaking open in a way that is so exciting, so exciting. The voices that have always been there, they're not new. It's just other voices are breaking through. And I think it's making the entire lexicon, let alone all of these different canons, so much more exciting and interesting. And yeah, I think it's an exciting time to be a writer, honestly, and an artist, and an artist of color, and a woman artist of color. And those things always follow me, yeah, always. Yeah.
And do you find that you're getting more interest in your work, or just that you are more able to get people to just read it as a play? Shall I put it that way? Is there more access?
Um, yes and no. Yes, in that the say theater is hungry for alternative voices. They're looking for Black women. You see them the breakdowns for calls for plays all the time. We're especially interested in BIPOC writers, Black and Indigenous people of color. That's awesome and exciting. I think that though we still are in a time where the expectation with regard to the stories being told is still a little restrictive. A
Mhm.
little. They're still looking for stories that don't necessarily include who people actually are.
Uh-huh.
So we're at the beginning of a very long road, and the door is open. So that's more than we can say that we've been able to say in the past. That door is now open, and it's not going to shut again because nobody's going anywhere. But it is interesting that I was in a workshop yesterday, an acting workshop yesterday, and I was tempted to ask the question. I decided not to. Do you think it was a casting director workshop? And I was thinking, do you see roles for people of color branching out from the very sort of utilitarian helpmate if you're Black, uh, comic relief if you're Asian, blah blah blah. And I didn't ask it, but I am aware that whether I'm acting or writing, um, I'm still in a little bit of a box,
Mhm.
But then, the choice is there to stay in the box or get out. And so I'm getting out of the box.
And you've but your work and as an actor have been to a lot of different festivals, correct? Theater
Yeah,
festivals around the country, around the world.
around the country. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so how is the festival circuit? Uh, and for those of you who aren't in in theater, so basically there are lots of theater festivals that will produce new works or experimental works, or that are off the basic mainstream, gotta look like it's Broadway material
Right.
stuff. And often that's where the up and coming authors and the more challenging works end up. So typically a little more accepting of new concepts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what's cool about that is they're sort of offloading all of that stuff on into the mainstream. Those little festivals, they do a world of good because they're a testing ground, and they're also a told you so ground, because they know that these plays are here. The Road Theater knows these plays are here, and the Road does its theater festival. Vagrancy, I'm with them right now, does a theater festival, and they're like, we know these plays are here. What happens though is somebody catches wind of, oh, so that JC Bates, she's amazing, and they start in the mainstream getting interested in this other work that they didn't know was there somehow, because it just wasn't access. So it's, they're really helpful, incredibly helpful, and educational.
Well, and I realize I also want to do a shout out to Boston Court Theater.
Yes, Boston Court.
If it wasn't Boston Court Theater, actually June would not be our guest today, because Jessica of Boston Court put us in touch with June, and thank you, Sandy, for putting us in touch with Boston Court. It's a wonderful wonderful network of things, but a local theater company that does a lot of challenging works.
Yeah. Boston Court is awesome,
and they're Central Pasadena, right? I'm trying to think of it in my head.
Central Pasadena, yeah.
Just outside of the Playhouse District, right?
Yeah, just on the other side of Colorado. They're on Colorado and like one over
Boston Court.
Yeah.
For those of you not familiar, Boston Court Theater is not in Boston. It's on Boston Court in Pasadena. So anyway, that's how we met. That's how we met June. So let's see. I want to talk a little bit more about, dig down a little deeper into your writing. We talked a little bit already about sort of, what you like to write. It's primarily you've done theater. Of course, yes. Everybody living in LA has a screenplay in their back pocket.
Yes, they do.
But that's not your main thing.
No.
But we'll look for you accepting your Academy Award for your Best Original Screenplay sometime in the near future.
Okay, thanks. I'll take
it. Any producers out here, I can give you June's contact.
Hint.
Exactly. And we heard how you got started. So with the encouragement that you had from your teacher to start writing plays, at what point did you kind of decide that this was a career?
Literally 4 years ago. It took me a long time to get to a place where I thought, I'm an artist, not because I can't think of anything better to do, but because I am. And, they tell you this is a long game. You got to play the long game. And they're not kidding. There are people, even the kids that, are writing plays for the Young Playwrights Festival, say at the Blank Theater in Los Angeles, have been doing it for years. They're, and we're catching them as they are learning the language of the theater and their particular language. And I think that I have had I've been incredibly lucky that I am stubborn, because writing is hard, acting is hard, directing is hard, and loving them, they don't necessarily always love you back. And so, it was actually the Good Minister that helped me realize, yes, you do know what you're doing. I finally knew what I was doing.
So good segue, June.
You're welcome.
So now we get to come to the section of, let's talk a little bit about that. So the play she's referring to is the Good Minister of Harare, I got it mixed up now. Is it
yes,
from
you're
The
right.
Good Minister from Harare, which is, I would say, a riff on a very famous Bertolt Brecht play called Good Woman of Szechwan. It was very interesting to read June's play. We're going to talk about it, and we'll actually read a section from it, as well as sort of how it interacts with the Brecht play, Good Woman of Szechwan. So you want to sort of give us how that project happened? What's your association with the Brecht, and what is your play?
Yes, yeah. So I got to work in 2007 with a theater company from Zimbabwe, Bulawayo specifically. The theater, their playwright Langa is amazing. He's one of the bravest people I've ever met. He has been arrested by the government twice, by which I mean he has been disappeared twice in Zimbabwe, and never stopped speaking out. He was invited to a university in Central California to have produced one of his plays, which would be used in a course on TV production. So tooled up there and got a chance to meet these guys. It was three of them. Kant, one of his lead actors, Mandla Moyo, and Kant's wife. And I remember meeting Mandla. He was standing on the opposite side of this outdoor courtyard. And, I met the other two and, they were really cool. And I'm looking over at this guy and I see this sort of, he looks like he's maybe 70, just with the biggest, brightest eyes. And I'm like, that's a cool dude. So I'm going to go over there and meet that guy. I walked up to him and I suddenly realized he was in his 30s. Mandla. And then we started talking a little bit and he told me his age. And his story, and it turns out that he is one of the victims of Robert Mugabe's Gukurahundi, which was his massacre of some 20,000 Ndebele in Zimbabwe. Mandla had been picked up and placed in one of the concentration camps and had seen the worst. And while he was a very open-hearted man, it had transformed him physically, given him a spiritual and a physical age that you don't see. So I got obsessed with this kid's story, and I can say kid because I was older than he was. I got obsessed with his story. I got obsessed with Kant's story, and this just was a bug in my brain for years, and I never quite figured out what it was I wanted to do, but I started reading up on Zimbabwe and what was happening. And in 2017, I saw a contest for plays about human rights. And I thought, yes, I'm writing this play now. And the play just sort of fell out of my head. Its form is evocative of a Bertolt Brecht play called The Good Person of Szechwan, The Good Woman of Szechwan, if you take the Bentley translation, which is about it's a parable, essentially, about, in its simplest form, how one becomes a bad person. How one learns to survive in a system that's not conditioned to care for people. It's told through the introduction by a water seller who is our narrator, but who gets dropped into the play. And I just loved the form of the play. I love the scope of it. Brecht doesn't want you to get seduced into kitchen sink drama. So he does some very specific things with pageantry, with song, with narrators that
It's
lets you,
almost Greek. It's almost
it's
like
almost
ancient
Greek.
Greek
Yes.
drama
It's
in
almost Greek
its
drama. Yes.
sense, poetry and symbolism and very sparse design. Yeah.
And very sparse design. And what you're left with are, just the people and the language. And I just thought, yeah, that's the play. That's how it's gonna make it. And it wasn't even it wasn't all conscious, honestly. I loved the way the title was constructed because it's so vague and already tells you so much about what you're going to see that I thought, yep, that's the title. Just kind of came from that, and then it would just sort of naturally fell out. But in going back, over it, I realized, yeah, these two plays really are in conversation structurally
Mhm.
and in terms of formula, So, yeah, I Bertolt Brecht was brilliant. A
Yeah,
little bit of
and
alliteration for you.
it was very, very interesting for me because I'd seen a brilliant production of Good Person of Szechwan back in the 90s, I think it was, with the Actors Gang, Tim Robbins directing, Shannon Holt in the lead. And it was made a profound impression on me, but I hadn't read the play until I reread it now in the context of having read your play first.
Yeah.
And again, the way that they intersect and the way I would love to see these two plays in repertory. I mean, it'd be really exciting.
Oh, cool.
Because of the sensibilities, because they're different, but it's that nexus of how do you survive with a good heart in a bad world?
Yes.
What choices do you make with yourself? And for those of you who aren't familiar with Good Person of Szechwan, she puts on a mask and pretends to be her cousin, and she does everything bad as her cousin and everything good as herself. And it's very, it's between ancient Greek and Kabuki. But that sensibility, and in your play, it's as if he just keeps having to do and having to not do, but to condone bad things happening until he simply can't stand by any longer and allow the bad things to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just about that point at which one does decide you can't, for the sake of your human self, let things go any longer.
Mm-hmm.
That's my aspiration with it anyway. Yeah.
And
He inherits a story and has to follow it through to its end because he is probably a good person.
And how it's the dynamic which we see, in all around us, of someone who comes from a small town that's trying to fit in the big city, and he's become a minor minister, and he's in government, and he's comfortable, and he has a wife, and he's paid, and if he doesn't rock the boat, he will be okay.
He'll be okay. But how do you be okay when everybody around you isn't?
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting that it's based on this fellow who refused to just stand by and let bad things happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot of fun to write, though. A little bit of you kind of wander into a nightmare when you're writing it because um it's not a play in which the bad things that happen are open display. But when you realize what was done to human beings, and there's not really a good reason why, you get in that headspace, and it's an education. It makes me think again about these guys, because they're still plugging away. They're still plugging away. And that's I think that's what's amazing about people. We can be horrible, but these people are pretty amazing. They're pretty amazing. And
Yeah,
yeah,
and the Mugabe era, as you say, the disappearings
yes.
that are going on. I mean, it's a very powerful work. I certainly hope to be able to see a production of it sometime.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I I I personally found that it was not unremittingly horrible. You
Oh,
know, it's
good.
not like you come out and you've got to slate your wrists or have
Right.
a really strong drink because oh my god, you know. And I've seen plays,
Right? It's just like, okay, well, that's
and I think in some way for me the poetry in it and the stylized sort of helped see it as a not as this exactly just a heinous piece of world history,
yeah.
but as a a fable about what can or can't happen.
That makes me happy. I'm glad. I'm glad.
So shall we read a little bit of this? Do you have
Sure.
that script? Because I think that it really does make a difference to hear the words.
Yeah.
And then as we're talking about what it sounds like and what we're doing. So have you got it there?
I do.
All right. Do we want to set the stage and tell people where we're at in the play and what's going on?
Okay. So we're near the beginning of the play. The minister has received a visit from his father, asking him to look into something horrible that has happened in their village and which is wreaking havoc with nature itself in their village. And this is sort of the back and forth of
And
whether or not.
I have the pleasure of reading the minister's part. And because this is taking place in Zimbabwe, I've asked June to do her best accent because I can't do a Zimbabwe accent. So I will be the bureaucrat who's trying not to sound like a peasant. All right, go. Let's start it.
Yes. And so I am here on a great embassage from the people of Itambo to their native son, the good minister,
Oh, deputy.
on whom all our hopes depend.
Listen, is it a water project? I've explained it before. There must be money for this kind of thing. Now, if you will see my secretary, she will provide you with the proper forms.
We have suffered a great wrong. Now heaven looks on us with dry eyes.
Oh, yes, but you see, it's a question of form. I mean, if it were as simple as digging a hole, I would not have my job, would I?
The land soaks up our tears and gives back only dust.
Excuse me?
I would not say they are starving in Itambo.
I send food.
And your friends in the parliament keep it out.
What friends? I sit behind a desk.
The axe forgets, but the tree does not forget.
Sorry?
Many came to draw water and instead were drawn. I would not say so much that they have disappeared as that they are no longer. I mean to say that their presence is inexplicably no more. They have exulted severally, departed post haste.
Old man, you're talking in riddles.
There is a well.
Now we're getting somewhere.
It is filled with bones.
Bones? What sort of bones?
Whiskey.
Here you are. Then you want to go to the police.
The police? You are like the man who escaped the lion's den and then went back to ask for his hat.
Sorry, I just remembered an engagement.
Oh, and to remember only cost a new suit. Whiskey.
Yeah, there you go. Look, I don't know what it is you want me to do. This is how you greet me? Your son? With bad dreams and a tale about bones? Perhaps what you want is a priest?
The dead do not forget.
My jurisdiction extends only to the living. If you want to tell ghost stories, then I suggest you make an appointment.
Sweet words do not chase away the devil, my son.
I've not seen you in 7 years.
Oh, and did you lose your way? Itambo is not so far.
Connect me to the Department of Justice and Legal Affairs.
This old man, this despot.
Yes, yes.
He has cut out our tongues. We are a nation of ghosts.
Father, I must ask you to refrain.
Someone must stand and speak the names of the dead.
Enough. Go make your speeches elsewhere.
You cannot eat a lie. You can only feed it.
You're going to talk to me about lies now?
There are things between a father and his son.
Oh, yes, I'm calling from the Ministry of Local Governance and Development. It's in regard to Ethombo. They hung up.
And are your legs broken?
Father.
You are the hope of Itambo.
I am just a man.
And when you grow to greet your ancestors, what will you tell them? But fear is nothing. The real thing is courage.
All right. Thank you. That was so. That's just a part of one of the opening scenes in Good Minister of Harare. It goes from there. We'll put it that way.
We'll say that.
So you were telling me that there's going to be a production of this. Tell us about that. That's pretty special stuff.
Yeah. So there's a theater here in Los Angeles, or there was a theater here, the Attic Theater, run by James, oh Lord, I'm forgetting James Carey. And he has been traveling back and forth between here and Zimbabwe to judge these acting contests for young people. He put me in touch with a director named Bob Tafadzwa, who lives in Zimbabwe, and gave Bob the play. Bob likes the play, and we're gonna put on a production of it. We're gonna put on a production. I'm not going because I'm not trying to. I'm not gonna go to jail, but you know, I'm not trying to go to jail. But yeah, it's really exciting. It's gonna be a 4-person cast. And Bob is going to direct. Bob is an incredible dramaturg. A dramaturg is, for folks who don't know, it's just a person who studies the story of the script and makes sure that you've got consistencies, looks for historical references that you might be able to use if you're in production, that kind of thing. They're just sort of a literary editor, and he's an incredible dramaturg. The play is I'm excited. I'm excited to do the play. I'm excited to see what he does with it because he's brilliant. And it looks like Mandla, who I was talking about earlier, is going to play the peasant.
And you said that the director recognized.
Yes. Yes.
Talk about that. That's quite a story too.
Yes, that's right. I totally skipped over that. So, a few weeks ago now, like 4 weeks ago now, Bob and I were talking about, we were starting to talk about casting. And he said, yeah, because I know this actor, I was reading the play and it reminded me of this actor I know. He's a really sweet guy. But there is a part of him that is incredibly wounded. And when he talks about what happened to his mother, he becomes a very different person. And I was like, yeah, that's really, yeah. I know a guy too and I told him the story about how I met Mandla. So then during our following communication, he said, yeah, so I'd kind of like to ask this actor that I know of. His name is Mandla Moyo. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, the guy that I was telling you about who becomes somebody else, I'd like to ask him to be the peasant. And I was like, my Mandla? And it turns out we were talking about the same guy. And I'm still in touch with Mandla. And so I get a WhatsApp communication from Mandla saying, hey, so I was just told that there's a play going on. I was just approached about a play going on and it's got your name on it. Is that you? And I'm like, yes, I hope that you will consider doing it. And it looks like he will be. Yeah.
Nice. And hopefully it will be filmed and
I think it will be. Yeah, I think it's going to be because yeah, I think it's going to be. Yeah. Yeah.
So another thing about the play is that it's written to be able, and people are playing multiple roles.
Playing multiple
And
roles,
that's
yeah.
part of how it's written, is so that
Mhm.
it can be done with a small cast, with people continuing to change their personas.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's part of it. I think part of the reason for that is practicality because, it's harder to do big plays these days. But once I was turned on to the idea, this play is about every man and every man. And so having people switch roles, a few people switch roles, I think helps tell the story about how one person is everyone. What happens to one happens to all. And so, yeah, once I was once I connected with that idea, I really just enjoyed. So I'm, I got to see a reading of um, this past June with a full seven actors, and I was particularly happy with how the one of the characters keeps showing up and changing form and changing, and it just, I don't know, it was fun. It was really fun.
Yeah, it's part of that. So
Yeah.
I want to just shift over to talk about one more thing, and then we'll open it up for audience questions. So the life and death of
Yeah.
a play and a video, I
Yeah.
believe, correct?
Yeah.
Do you want to
Yep.
tell us a little bit about that project?
Sure. So during the early stages of the George Floyd protests, a young woman in Tallahassee, Florida, named Oluwatoyin Salau was discovered went missing, and later it was discovered that she had been murdered. And she had been murdered, in fact, by a Black man. And she was, as I said, a Black Lives Matter activist. I got word of her story on my birthday and again got obsessed. You know, she was a singular young woman. She was homeless. She had been uh, trafficked, and she was still out there fighting for someone else. I decided I needed to write something about and for her. And so as I was obsessing about her and reading all about her and everything I could, the artistic director of The Vagrancy, with whom I directed something a month before, calls me up and says, hey, I got this grant. Do you want to do something? And I was like, yes. And this is what I did. It's a monologue in 16 parts that is also a play in a monologue. 16 Black women all telling the story of this young woman, her life and death. And I got to work with some amazing actors on it. they're little brief monologue-lets that are woven together and tell this young woman's story. And yeah, it helped. I think what was amazing about it was as I was working with like the fourth or fifth woman, and they were bringing just their honest selves, it occurred to me that this was a way to heal, because these were 16 women who had gone through various shades of the same kind of thing, being objectified in a in an incredibly dehumanizing way. Um, just trying to figure out what it is to be human and to be Black and to be a woman. Again, the intersection of my many selves. Um, and these were women from all walks of life, and our stories are the same, which is both comforting and heartbreaking. And
Well,
yeah.
and something that I had mentioned this to you before, but it reminds me again, in a intersecting way with the Maya Angelou.
Yes.
You know, and actually, when I was in high school, I was in a production of For Colored Girls that was biracial.
Wow.
I was the woman in red.
Oh my gosh.
So
Oh, Anya
that
would have loved to see that.
set of monologues of just each of the women telling that little tiny bit of their story,
Yes.
um, is I found very powerful. Now I was watching a video. So the video that you do, it says it's the 8 minute and 46-second version,
Yeah.
like George Floyd.
Yeah.
Was the stage production longer? Is this so these are shortened monologues?
These are excerpts from a full piece that is 25 minutes long. So this is not all of the women, and it's pared down monologues, parts of eight of, I think it's 8 of the women. No, actually, I get everybody in there.
It's all 16.
It's all 16 women.
They're like 20 or 30 seconds long.
20 or 30 seconds long each. Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe that people can see this on the internet, or is it posted?
Yeah, it's posted on YouTube.
Yeah, so if you can put in the chat box what the link is.
Yeah.
It's I'll say it's a very powerful piece of video. It's just under 9 minutes long. And I encourage you to put up and look at it, because I also found June's writing in this very compelling as well. So it's just these face after face after face of Black women talking about things that nobody should have to go through. So it's a good piece of filmmaking. Although the credits at the end go by so fast, you can't see them unless you pause.
I know. That was yeah. 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 There's the 20-minute, 25-minute version. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can just again stick the link in there, or you can, if anyone can't pull that off the chat, then you can just email me later and I'll send you a link. But it's and also June is in it. You're the last, or you're the last of the voices, so you'll get to see a little bit of her acting in that too.
Yeah.
So okay, in a moment I'm just gonna open it up to regular conversation. Do you have any sort of last words before we open it up to Q&A?
Just I'm learning. I'm still learning. And I think that what's amazing about what I get to do is that I don't stop learning. There's always new people to meet, there's always new stories to tell, and there's always new ways to tell the stories I'm interested in telling. And I think it's part of the reason I love what I do. I love what I do, and I feel really lucky and blessed to be able to say that. And it's really fun to share it with you.
And you change. So your view of the world will be different a year from now.
A year from now.
and after this very strange isolating year where everybody's isolated and disconnected, it's going to be, just there's just so much ongoing every day when you look
Yeah.
at things the way you do as a playwright and an observer of humanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
I guess it's one of the joys of growing up. I refuse
growing
to
up.
grow up.
Yeah.
Or
Okay, not growing
growing.
up.
Not growing up. No, I'm not growing up. No, I refuse to grow up.
Exactly. All right, so let's see. Now I'm going to just go ahead and we'll start. If anybody has questions, it's actually easiest to put them in the chat box if you're okay with that. Otherwise, we'll take some questions from the audience. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take both of our spotlights off so that we can just see ourselves here in gallery view. So if you go to gallery view, then you can just see everybody who's here. And Florine does have her hand up. And so you can go ahead and ask your question, Florine.
Oh dear. Were there any new avenues that you found you had to walk in order to write cross-culturally, cross-linguistically, and perhaps with new imagery?
Always. And I mean, and with every play it's literally with every play there is something you have to look up, you have to research, you have to study, you have to immerse yourself in. You're a writer, so you know this. And I think part of the joy of what we do, I'm sure you have this too, is that I don't know that. So I got to find out. With Good Minister, for example, I don't speak Ndebele, but I did have to, because it was a part of it was in the bones of the work. I had to find out about the differences between Shona and Ndebele, and even down to the anthem. There are 3 anthems because one's in English, one's in Shona, and one's in Ndebele. And I don't know. Yes. So yes, there is always I'm always wandering off someplace new. Always wandering off someplace new. It's so fun.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions. A couple of them are about the production, and one is the production of your play only going to be in Africa, or is there any plans to do it here as well? And then Sally wanted to know, why aren't you going? And I guess that's why aren't you going to Zimbabwe?
Yeah, well, the short of it is Zimbabwe is a frightening place to be right now, and is a frightening place for artists to be right now who are not pro-government. And so I am Congolese on my father's side, and I am also not going to Democratic Republic of Congo because I'm a chicken. I'm a chicken. I am an armchair protester, and right now, I'm okay with that.
You're writing.
I'm writing. I'll be writing that. I'll be busy that day. Yeah.
So has the pandemic seriously affected the showcasing of new playwright work, especially because theater festivals? This is from Cindy.
Yeah. Hi, Cindy. So it hasn't, in that everyone has switched over to Zoom. Their theaters have learned quickly how to get our stories out on this incredible platform that lets you reach so many people. It's kind of liberating. It's a little scary because the question people have is actually, what are we going to do if and when we go back?
And there may be fewer theaters when we get back.
There will be. In fact, right down the block from me is a theater that has been gutted and is no more. It's a reality. So that's part of the reason that people have switched over, because we need to survive. I think people are confident that theater will come back, but it's going to be a very different landscape. Yeah, it's going to be a very different landscape.
So Sandy Greenstein, who, full disclosure, is on the board at Boston Court. Thank you, Sandy, for being here with us. So she has a really interesting question. So you're moved by biography. So when you talk about being obsessed with somebody's story, how do you start weaving fiction into that?
Because I am not interested in putting myself on display, I tend to attach things that I've seen, heard, experienced to found stories. Mandla's story very loosely became the minister's story. The life and death of, while I could relate, I used the facts of her case as the framework. I wrote a play once about 9/11, and that one was sparked by walking to a vigil on Santa Monica Pier with my little candle, and there were people with candles, and there was this couple in shorts walking ahead of me. And at the time, and still, Santa Monica was just littered with homeless who were making their home on that overlook. And this couple that was walking ahead of me that had their vigil candle started to move over as this one guy was walking toward them. He had on a black garbage bag, black pants, and I can't remember what it was on his head, but his eyes were totally blown out. And I think it was actually tin foil. And then there was a guy who was dressed in a corduroy jacket, corduroy pants, and had no shoes. The bottom of his pants were frayed, and his feet had ballooned to twice their size. They were so calloused and scarred because he didn't have shoes. And that became the impetus for this play about homelessness, and how ironic it was that some of the people who died in those buildings probably didn't have somebody looking for them. Some of the people who died around those buildings, I should say, probably didn't have somebody looking for them anymore. So, I guess the fiction is, how do I tell this in a way that is relatable? But it's always sort of pulled from stringing together actual facts, if that makes sense.
And your relationship to,
and my relationship to
how you are reacting to
everything. Yeah.
Right. And also, I forgot to give a shout out to Sandy as the Pasadena Senior Center's board president. So thank you, Sandy, for all the work that you do on behalf of the Pasadena Senior Center for many, many, many years.
Yes.
So let's see, we have a question from Kim. Do you know why there aren't more Black rom-coms? Why is there seldom a happy ending, most times trauma? Is it because it's thought that the material won't cross over?
I don't think so. I think there are romantic comedies. They're just not produced. There are, just like there are but I think that America has an obsession with Black people's pain and with Black people sort of being helpmates to others, to helpmates to non-Black people. And um, so Black humor is regarded as it's just not saleable. It's just marketing. Yeah. Unfortunately.
And
Unfortunately.
hopefully that'll shift. As you and I were
Hopefully.
talking before, there was a period in the 80s where
Yeah.
there was a fair amount of, shall we say, color in television and movies, and then it sort of drained.
And then it sort of drained. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, there's this comic, the comic, um, oh, Lord Jesus, Dave Chappelle, he had a really good thing going. He had to stop doing comedy because he realized people were laughing for the wrong reasons. So the market is just a very hard place, and it is very much bent on stereotype. And when you don't fall into that category, they don't want you. When you do fall into that category, then you're sort of exploiting yourself. And it's changing. I think it's changing slowly, but it's changing. But it's just the market. It's just the
And
market.
I'll just make a plea to anyone of capacity who has the ability to sponsor playwrights, composers, artists,
Yes.
because one of the ways that artists are able to create transformative art is when the market forces aren't what drives them. So you don't
Right.
have to write the next Marvel comic movie.
Right.
You can write Life and Death of. So two
Box.
questions that are sort of in conjunction here. One is, do you have a work in development or planning now? And then someone still says you didn't address whether Good Minister would come here.
I would love for Good Minister to come to the States. I would love that. So I'm sending it out, but and I would love for it to. It was in Los Angeles. The reading that we did last summer was at Lord Epps Theater here in Los Angeles, but that was a Zoom production. And the director really likes the play, and I am hopeful that at some point, yes, it will. I am working on a new play. It is with the Vagrancy Theater. The play is about a woman who keeps witnessing the end of the world and waking up in an insane asylum or purgatory. We're not quite sure which.
Okay. All right. Well, that's I think actually that's the end of our questions on chat, and I think that is something for us to wrap our heads around as we close this up. I love that. Again, it's going back to the Greeks. It's Cassandra, isn't it?
It's Cassandra.
Cassandra meets Donnie Darko. I think that's
there you go.
Really what you're going.
I'm thinking I'm gonna have to steal that because that's kind of it. That's kind of it.
Thank you all for joining us today. June, it's been a complete delight to visit with you. I hope we'll see and hear more of you. Keep us posted whenever you have a production. We'll all come see it.
Okay.
Thank you all for joining, and we'll say good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Annie. This was so fun. Thank you.
Super fun.